Focus on Abilities is brought to you by Tier Memorial Hermann, redefining rehabilitation, removing barriers, re-enabling independence. In the ILRU Southwest ADA Center, promoting compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act.
Welcome to Focus on Abilities, a program about issues affecting the lives of people with disabilities. I'm Lex Frieden, your host. I'm professor at the University of Texas Health Science Center at Houston, and I direct the Independent Living Research Utilization Program at Tier Memorial Hermann. We're glad to have you with us today, and we have a very special guest for you. I'm going to take a break, but before we take that break, before we come back and introduce our guest, I want to ask you a question, one that we will answer before the end of today's program. That is, what standard does 58 inches define? What condition is the standard 58 inches associated with? We'll be right back with the answer to that question and more. This is Focus on Abilities, and I'm Lex Frieden. We're here today with a very special guest, and I'm pleased to introduce to you Bill Klein. Bill, thanks for being our guest today.
It's my pleasure to be here.
Now, Bill, aside from being a celebrity, co-star of the Little Couple, and a business person, a husband, a father, how else would you describe yourself? Is there anything else to do?
Tired, I think, is the way to describe myself these days. There's a bunch of different things that I've accomplished over my 39 years that I guess help define me, and some things that I guess are labels that have been associated with me. I have a disability that I've been working through since the day I was born, and that particular disability, dwarfism, my particular type of dwarfism is called spondyloepiphyseal dysplasia. That's a mouthful. Is characterized by short stature and issues related to my joints and my spine. But that being said, my stature and the problems that come along with it are not necessarily limitations unless I've let them become limitations to me. So over the years, I've been able to reach senior management positions within pretty large companies. I've gone to college, graduated from a top-tier school. I met the love of my life, and then we wound up being fortunate enough to find our two children on different continents, and ran around the world twice over the past year to get them. And we've built some businesses. I've seen employees of mine that have gotten married. They've purchased homes. They've bought cars, and they've gone on wonderful vacations that I'm still jealous to this day that they've didn't take me on.
So Bill, that's a nice succinct biography. But
yeah.
What people really want to know is, I think, what they don't see of you on your network television program, and that is growing up. I mean, was it difficult? You're from New York originally, right?
Sure. Yeah. I grew up on Long Island.
Went to public schools?
Yes, sir.
Find it any challenges there 39 years ago?
Yeah. Public school in the 80s was not exactly as accommodating. I remember a couple of instances where it would probably today be characterized as bullying that I had experienced back then. I still remember some of it. I still remember some of the guys that had done it to me. Unfortunately or fortunately, I don't hold any grudges, but I do remember names.
Unfortunately for them, maybe.
But yeah, there was definitely some tough times. School desks were too high, chairs were too low, so I would literally have my chin on the desk. In certain instances.
40 years ago, people with disabilities, including dwarfism, were not as active in the community. I mean, people weren't accustomed to seeing folks with disabilities, generally speaking.
Sure.
And I suppose you must have been the subject of objectivity or not derision necessarily, but at least curiosity.
Yeah. Not only are you kind of sheltered from the world typically as a person with a disability because of the circumstances that aren't afforded to you. You can't get into public places. They didn't have ramps everywhere. They didn't have desks that accommodated people in wheelchairs or people that were short in stature or things like that. It was more convenient for you to accomplish your goal by not going into the mainstream society for those types of things. For me, my mom was good enough to kind of stick her thumb into the school system and say, you know, it stops here. I can't have my son at home because he needs a better education than what I'm, you know, capable of providing as a stay-at-home mom. So she became the president of the PTA.
Okay.
And took charge that way. A lot of parents today actually do the same thing for their children. They start championing efforts to bridge the gap between what's provided and what's needed, and they represent their children's best interests and that of other people.
During the time you were in school, a lot of progress was made in the United States.
Yeah.
I mean, before you got into school, the Education for All Handicapped Children's Act became law, and then later on, probably while you were still in school, the ADA was passed, correct?
Yeah, I was in about 10th grade when the ADA was passed, and dwarfism was listed as one of the disabilities that was covered by the ADA, or recognized by the ADA. You know, while it didn't do anything for me at that particular point in time because of how far along I had gone through the system, I was certainly thrilled that, you know, when I got to college, there was something that I could lean back on to say, legislation had been passed that might afford some accommodations that were reasonable to make my main objective of studying my only focus that I need to worry about.
Did you run into any issues in college?
Well, I went to college in New York City, which was progressive in the sense that you know, they had curbside, you know, egress, you know, into the street, so you didn't have to worry about big curbs on every street corner. And part of the reason why I picked NYU was because everything was in an elevator. All those buildings had elevators, and they're 10 stories, 20 stories high. So one of the main reasons why I went there was I knew I didn't have to deal with a 2-story building and going to the dark corner to find an elevator that was accessible.
See, that's interesting. It was a practical part of your decision about where to go to school was not based entirely on your desire to study a particular curriculum, but also based on the convenience of the access of the facilities.
Yeah, you know, I got accepted to all the schools I had applied to. NYU gave me a nice scholarship too, so that was part of it. But part of the consideration was certainly that you know, from a reasonable accommodation perspective, even a state university campus is. While they're accommodating inside the building, to get from a dorm room to that building would take 20, 30 minutes to walk it, and to drive a car on campus and to afford a car in college. Both things that were very, very, very different to, you know, very hard to accomplish.
But New York, even then, was one of the most accessible cities in America. We often thought that the curb ramps at the corners were made for people who worked in the clothing district trying to drag those large carts up and down. And
sure.
so
the garment racks and
exactly, that made it easier for them, so those of us in wheelchairs benefited from that. But New York had the first accessible transit system in the United States, result of a lawsuit by some friends of ours with the Paralyzed Veterans, Eastern PVA. Bill, when you got out of college, then immediately started applying for jobs?
Yeah. When I graduated school, I went home like most college students do, and you know, had my diploma in hand that was, you know, worth a heck of a lot more than the job I was about to get. But nonetheless, I started applying. I graduated with a degree in biology, and most kids in the 90s that had a degree in bio went into the pharmaceutical industry. It was a nice salary, you know, nice base salary, entry level. You get a free car, you get, you know, all that sort of fun stuff. So the benefits were worth the exercise. And I applied to in excess of 50 companies over a 6-month period of time. Some were very well, overt about their intentions not to hire me. There was one company in particular that told me I didn't have the look that they were looking for. And, as I'm
By
exiting...
that, they meant a height of more than...
I would presume it wasn't the suit, although, I had a gray suit on, everybody else had a gray suit on, but they looked like they were about to storm Normandy or something. It was a bunch of tall folks, 6'2", blonde hair, blue eyes if you were a dude, and if you were a woman, you were very easy to look at.
Okay.
So that was back in the day when aesthetics were the thing that people focused on in the pharma business. And I understand to a certain degree that, it's a warm welcome that you receive when you're, a model type person. But at the same time, one of the folks had asked me a question and said, well, we're afraid that you won't get noticed because of your size. When you walk into a medical office, like literally, people won't see you.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and I found it to be funny because I would think that I would be the one person
most noticed.
Yeah, that you'd pick out of a crowd. Unless you were looking at just heads. But sitting in an office, I would be the one person that you'd always recognize, and that amongst a sea of suits waiting to hawk their product, I would be the one person that's distinguishable.
But it was perception. I mean, that's really what we're talking about here. Perception is that not based on who you were or what you knew or what your capability of was to meet the requirements of the job.
Sure.
Perception unrelated to any of that.
Sure. Yeah. It was the perception of the interviewer. Probably a little bit of, probably a lot of those interviews went south because of a lack of understanding of my disability, whether or not I'd be able to perform the job at hand.
Sorry, Bill, were you surprised by that experience, by some of the turn downs you got, some of the reactions you got, or were you prepared for that given other experiences in your life?
Well, I would say that surprise would probably not be the right word, but disappointed because it was in the medical field. Granted, a tangential part of the medical field, but still directly involved with working with doctors and nurses and the reception folks in private practice and in hospitals. You'd think that they would be more welcoming of somebody with a disability, certainly more comfortable around them. But I'm not interviewing with the people in the office. I'm interviewing with some, corporate, regional manager that probably has never met a little person in their life. Didn't really forecast that it would be me that they're talking to today, and didn't handle themselves very well.
So I'm curious to know if you were frustrated by that, if you ever got angry or depressed, and I'd like for you to talk about that after we take a break here. So we're going to take a break. Bill Klein is our guest today, and we hope that you all stay tuned. We'll be right back with more Focus on Abilities. Welcome back to Focus on Abilities. Our guest today is Bill Klein from The Little Couple. And Bill, we're talking about your exercise in futility, trying to get a job after graduating from college. Did you ever get angry or frustrated or depressed about all the experiences you were having with people who saw you for your size and not for your abilities?
Yeah, there was certainly a lot of frustration. I remember multiple times leaving the hotel that you do your, groups of interviews in and walking to my car knowing that I didn't get the job, knowing that the reason why I didn't get the job was because of my outward appearance and not what I had to offer in the way of ability. And it's hard sometimes. You have to make sure that you don't jade yourself when you go into the next interview. Because if you keep that attitude too long, and it's okay to be mad, in my opinion anyway. It's okay to be frustrated, but you can't harbor that frustration and let it...
If you go into the game thinking you're going to lose,
you're going to lose.
The likelihood is you lose.
Absolutely. And so, what I normally would do is I'd review what I did right, what I did wrong in the interview, how I approached my disability in particular. Did they approach it? My interview style, what I could improve, and then look to enhance it for the next time. I think to a certain degree what I realized over time was instead of trying to hide my obvious disability, I started to approach it with a bit more of an outward approach. So since they were too shy to ask questions, I started volunteering answers.
Now, is this something just occurred to you? Did you have a confidant that suggested that to you? Did you consult with your mom?
Actually, while I was doing my interviews, I worked a midnight shift at an abandoned warehouse out on Long Island, so I could basically sleep in the warehouse and get paid and pay for the gas to go do my interviews.
Cool.
Yeah, my dad hooked me up with a friend that knew a guy. I got that job. Scary place, but it gave me a lot of time to think because there was no one else around. And I kind of came to the conclusion that if I were going to have any success, I would have to approach this from a different perspective. And what I realized was people are intimidated by my presence because they don't know how to act. And so their goal is to get me out of the interview as quickly as possible. And that's a problem because I won't get the job if they want me to leave. So that was the light that had shined on my head for a moment there. And after that, it became more of how do I introduce my stature and how do we talk about it in a way that is disarming so that people aren't afraid, so that we address it and we move forward. Now we talk about how many millions of dollars I can generate for your company.
Well, it's interesting because it's a subtle kind of point that you have to be careful about. If you go in describing yourself as having a disability, as being a person of short stature, you might say something that clicks in their mind that wakes them up to something that they were concerned about that they really might not have thought about. So sure. It's a fine line to walk, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it's a gamble. There are certainly people out there that as soon as you acknowledge your own disability in front of them, it opens the door for them to presume that there's some sort of snowball effect that will affect my ability to perform well for them, and it's representative of their ability to hire and the liabilities associated with it. And so, let's talk about it openly and how inept you'll probably be. And so we want to make sure we don't do that.
When you change the conversation, then the reactions obviously changed because you did get a job.
Yeah.
How many offers did you have after that point?
After I got my first job?
Well, no, after you changed your approach.
I still only had one offer.
Okay.
What I had seen was a better reaction to my first interviews. I started getting a lot more second interviews. Okay. But the story was still a little different, with the second interviewer each time. So, you'd have to start over again with your disability and addressing those things and then being able to move forward. But it wasn't shortly after I had changed that mindset, that the way that I would approach things, that I wound up getting my first job. And the way it wound up working out was I had applied for a job that was listed as medical device sales in the newspaper, faxed in my resume. I did a phone interview. Interview went well. He invited me in for an in-person interview. And the way the story is told to me, so this is hearsay from my former boss, was that they saw me get out of the car and all they saw was hair walking across the windowsill. And I got into the reception area and I introduced myself to the receptionist, said that I was here for a job application, an interview, and I needed to fill out an application, so on and so forth. She gave me the clipboard with the paperwork and disappeared. Apparently what she had done was ran into the office to my boss.
To warn him.
To warn him of my stature. Probably not the most positive of ways to describe a little person either, saying that there was a midget in the reception area.
The M word.
Yeah, the M word, which, people ask me about that, and I could certainly talk about it, but, why is the M word, midget, a bad word? And it's more the fact that no one's ever said it to me in a positive light that, is indicative of why it has a bad connotation. Mm-hmm. I don't care whether, P.T. Barnum or, Tom Thumb or whomever had pituitary dwarfism and was perfectly fine with being a midget when they're labeled. But from my perspective, nobody's ever said it to me or anybody I know where they were referring to me in a positive light, and that being a compliment.
So it's possible that she went to the boss and said, "We've got one here."
It's very possible, yeah. And I think his reaction was a testament to the reason why we had been working together for almost 10 years until we sold that company, why I was promoted through the ranks above people that had been working there for years prior to me. And and why after we sold that business, we wound up becoming partners in a new endeavor. And that was his comment to her and to all the folks in the bullpen. We had an inside sales department, which was the job I was applying for. He said, if you or anybody else, says anything derogatory, you'll be fired. Because this guy did phenomenal over the phone. His pedigree is great, and I want to hire him. This is a formality, and so that was basically the conversation that was supposedly had, and after that it was
So
all downhill.
this one employer saw you for what you could contribute to the company and not for your stature.
Had not a care in the world about my stature. If I could show up to work on time, perform well, be early, stay late, work hard, and bring in the revenue, that's all he cared about. That was his job.
Bill, that started you in the world of the larger economy, and at some point you married Jen Arnold.
Yeah.
Did you meet her in college?
Actually, the way the story kind of goes is we had met originally when we were both 10. We were both in the same hospital in Baltimore, Maryland.
My gosh.
And she was in for surgery. I was in for PT. I had just been cut out of a full hip spica cast. And so you were basically an inpatient physical therapy for a while. My wife was getting some similar surgery done. And she was post-op, so she was pretty miserable. So she kicked me out of the room. And of course, I was, I guess cruising for chicks.
How old were you?
10.
10 years
Yeah,
old. Well, that's precocious.
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that I've learned about folks with disabilities is you grow up a little earlier.
Okay.
You deal with adult situations, whether you like it or not, and you're around people that are talking about serious stuff when you're young, and so your attitude kind of mimics to a small degree that of people that are older than you. Most of my friends in high school and college were years older than me. Mm-hmm. So I think that's one of those things where reality kind of gets rid of some of your playful childhood. Although I had a fun childhood, still dealing with tough situations makes you a little bit more grown up.
So you ran into Jen several times and eventually decided.
Well, the next time we met was when we were both 21. She was doing an internship with our orthopedic physician, and the nurse practitioner had tried to hook us up. I was working at Cold Spring Harbor, going to school up in New York, and she was selling my virtues very well. But Jennifer was headed off to Johns Hopkins the next year. Said I can't be distracted, and then the next year I did the same exact internship. And he only does one per summer. So I did it my senior year, she did it her junior year. We're both the same age. So same nurse practitioner selling the same story about Jennifer going to Hopkins next year. She's brilliant, she's cute, all those fun things. You guys would get along great. I said, no, I got a girlfriend up in New York, and I got my own thing going on. Thanks, but no thanks. And that's the way it went. And then 10 years later, at 31 years old, we both were, I guess, settled into our careers a lot more and grew up a little bit. We both went online separately and, logged into a place called datalittle.com, which was a site specifically made for people with short stature.
Interesting.
And put up our profiles. And I wrote to her. She ignored my email, or she says she didn't pay the bill yet, so she couldn't get access to her inbox. I don't know if I believe that.
Probably not.
Yeah, probably not. But then she wrote to me 2 months later and gave me her "Didn't we meet at a Little People conference?" line, and of course, I had known who she was, so I started chatting with her. Email, phone calls turned into a first visit, and love at first sight. That was it.
Wonderful. So, Bill, you've got a family now.
Yeah.
You've got a pet store.
Mm-hmm.
You've got a TV show. What else is going on?
I do consulting for small businesses, some in Houston, some I do around the country, startups, some mid-sized companies as well. I talk about issues like the ones we're talking about here with different organizations as well. So I do a lot of public speaking and some private coaching with respect to employers that are looking to hire people with disabilities, because when it comes down to it, we've put in such an infrastructure in corporate America with respect to human resources and what not to do. People are so careful that you almost can't address the things that are necessary, that are provided for by the ADA and reimbursement by the state and local municipalities, where there's funding available, but you'll never get to it if you don't ask the questions of what do you need.
Bill, thanks for being our guest today on Focus on Abilities.
No, thank you very much for having me.
It's a good conversation, and really appreciate everything you've shared here. And we'll visit again sometime.
Sounds good.
I want to thank all of you for watching Focus on Abilities. We'll be right back with a closing thought. You've been watching Focus on Abilities on HTV. I'm Lex Frieden. Our guest today has been Bill Klein, and we've talked about a number of issues related to Bill's own personal experience. At the beginning of the program, I asked a question, and I said, what standard is defined by 58 inches? I'm going to ask Bill to give us the answer to the question. Bill?
Yeah, 58 inches is the max height that you're allowed to be to join the club, as we call it. Dwarfism is characterized by folks that are short in stature, where their max height is 4'10" or 58 inches.
Which is not to say there's a lot of different kinds of dwarfism.
Yeah, there's over 200 types of skeletal dysplasia. There's also pituitary dwarfism. Then there's also folks that just come from different backgrounds where they're short in stature. I've met a few people that have said they wanted into the club.
Bill, thanks for being our guest today.
It's my pleasure.
And thank all of you once again for watching. Please tune in next time for more Focus on Abilities.
Focus on Abilities was brought to you by Tier Memorial Hermann, redefining rehabilitation, removing barriers, re-enabling independence, and the ILRU Southwest ADA Center, promoting compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act.